David Costabile, welcome to An Actor Despairs, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm hanging in, man. I just got to say, like, what you've done with your career has. So I told this when Glenn Flesher was on, when Shea Wiggum was on, when Morgan Spector was on. You are one, and many others. I don't want other actors to think I'm not including them, but you are one of the finest actors in the world. And I've said this
Wow.
before, and I'll say it again because I think the metaphor is just so astute. If you look at acting as a form of athleticism, I have watched you spar and spar with some of the biggest and greatest actors in the world, and you emerge victorious every time. And when I watch you work, it fills me with inspiration. And I don't need to tell you, the politics and the bureaucracy of this business. You can get lost in all of that, but what this is at the end of the day, it's about the work, and your work is some of the finest work I have ever seen. And it's an immense honor to have you on this show.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
I mean every word of it.
No, I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. in Chevy
Oh,
Chase, Maryland.
got it.
And then I went to, I did my undergrad at Tufts University up in Boston.
Wow. I'm Richmond,
Outside
Virginia,
of
so
Boston.
I was so close.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So close. Uh, and then, and then I was out, then I worked professionally for about 3 years as an actor. And then after college, and then I decided to get my MFA and I went back to school. In 1992.
And
How old were you in 1992?
I was 2 years old. I love it, man. Talk to me about that, though, because
it's a good year. It's a good year for both of us.
Yeah.
92? Well,
Yeah.
you were two. You were walking.
Yeah.
I
think I was saying dad and mom, listening to Kurt Cobain,
No doubt, I'm sure.
But talk to me about that experience between Tufts and the interim period before NYU. What were you doing?
At college, a group of friends from and I, we all moved to Albany, New York, and we started a free outdoor Shakespeare company, and that we did, in Washington Park in Albany, New York, every summer, and we were doing rotating rep of classical plays, mostly Shakespeare, and doing outreach, teaching kids about Shakespeare and teaching them, also playing games with them, and in the community. And it was we were going to change the world type deal, and it was an incredible experiment, and we worked really hard, and we made a lot of very fun and very exciting free theater for people to come and participate in the middle of the summer. And then I traveled around. I worked in Atlanta at Theater Emory, and then I worked at I was an understudy at Arena Stage in DC. I moved back there for a little bit, and I was like a carpenter in their shop during the day, and then I was an understudy at night. And I was a lousy carpenter, and they basically only let me sweep the floors because I sucked so bad. They were nice enough to give me a job so that I could actually try to live. And at a certain point that I realized, like, that the narrow way that I knew how to make something wasn't going to suit me over the long haul, and I knew that I wanted to do it. I knew that I wanted to have a lifetime doing it, and I had to get more. There had to be a larger breadth about how to make something.
Okay.
And who just came into the room? You don't have to be so mad at them.
Oh, is my dad and
Hi,
my
Dad.
dog.
There's nothing wrong with Dad and the dog joining in. They can join in.
Hey, Dad, come say hello to David.
Don't be so mad at Dad.
Here, say hello.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, David.
You can come
How's
over
it going?
here.
Hi, David.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
All right, grab my dog.
He got
Sorry
so
about
mad
that.
at you, Dad.
Well, it's like the audio,
Okay,
cool. So picking back up, so they gave you a job as a carpenter, and you were doing that. Was there someone shaping your
So
career?
I sort of felt like at a certain point I had to I just had to expand the way I was doing stuff, and I needed to know more. And I was what I had learned in college, or what I had practiced outside of that, it was just too narrow. It was too pointed in a way, and there needed to be a much wider way of looking at the world, way of looking at story, looking at the way of collaboration than I had, because I knew that I had gotten into a situation where someone I had worked with one of the a director from college, this guy Vinnie Murphy actually, had hired me at Theater Emory, which is a part of Emory University where they have pros and undergrads work together
Yeah.
in the theater. I don't know if they still do that, but they did for a long time. And it was a great idea. And he was asking me to do something that I had never done before, and I couldn't do it. And I knew that I would get fired if it hadn't been my friend
Yeah.
letting me sort of try to learn on the spot. And at that moment, I kind of was like, oh, hell, I've got to expand the way I think about stuff, because I just don't know how to do something different. Somebody's asking me to do something different. I don't even remember what particular way it was, but I
Yeah.
just knew that I felt like I had no cash in the account.
Totally.
And I was like, oh, shit. I know that if it hadn't been my friend, they would have been like, you're out, dude. You can't do it. You suck. And so that really led me back to school. And I had a friend, I had my friend, Rainn Wilson.
Yeah, I
He's
love
in The
Rain.
Office.
Yeah, he's
So
great.
Rainn was a good friend of mine, and he was going to NYU at the time, and we had been friends since undergrad. And he was suggesting, he was like, you got to come here. You got to come here. It's this is the place for you. And so I knew that was where I wanted to go. And lucky enough
This
to be
was
there.
during Ron Van Loo's tenure.
Yeah, Ron was there then.
Wow,
And
amazing.
Zelda Fitchandler. So Zelda was still running Arena Stage, and she was running um, the grad acting program. And Ron
Wow.
was the main teacher there. And so they were sort of a pair, Zelda Fitchandler and Ron.
And did you do the big three? Did you do Yale, Juilliard, NYU?
No, I didn't apply to Juilliard because I knew I didn't want to do 4 years. And I applied to Yale and I didn't get in. And then I applied to NYU.
Wow. And how was that experience being in grad school? Because it's like you and 12 to 14, maybe 16 at the highest others.
I mean, we had 18, 17.
Oh, you had a big class.
It was a big class. They've reduced the size of the classes now. It was a great experience. It was a life-changing experience. And we had a great ensemble, and the teachers I had there were extraordinary. And I taught there in that same program for 9 years. And that was an incredible experience as well, and something. And then I also started the alumni association for that program and raised money for scholarships and stuff, and to help connect grads. And I did that for almost 15 years. So it was a long time, and it was a really valuable place for me. And I made lifelong friends there, and people that will be my forever collaborators. And
That's so beautiful. And I'm curious, because I had a long talk with Glenn about this. How was the showcase for you? Because he said it was pretty brutal for him. Was
yeah,
that?
he had a hard showcase. My showcase was very good for me.
I mean, must have been so good that it got you The Wire, the greatest show of all time.
No, The Wire didn't come for years after that. That
Oh,
was
really?
Oh yeah, that was because I was in the 5th season of The Wire, and I don't even know what year we shot.
That would have been 2006 or 7 then.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
9. We graduated that's 11 years. I graduated in 95.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying that was your undergrad. I apologize. Wow.
No, that was my grad.
That's amazing, man. And then talk to me. What was the landscape like then? Were you doing co-star, guest star stuff for the big networks? Because
no. After grad school, it was mostly I mostly did theater. My first I was in I was an understudy in the ensemble in Central Park and in Shakespeare in the Park, and then then we did that the first Broadway gig I did was The Tempest that George Wolfe directed, that Patrick Stewart was in.
Yeah.
When you were a tiny child, so you were 4 then. And then I had written when I was in grad school, I had co-written this show with friends of mine from grad school called The New Bozina, and we did an off-Broadway run, and it was a very fun and successful, extraordinary. It was a clown show that we had written while we were in grad school. And when you're in the grad acting program, they have this thing, and the idea was just go and make something. And my classmates, Kevin Isola and Michael Dahl and myself, and then Rainn Wilson directed it. And the 4 of us made this, we collaborated on this piece, and it was like a physical comedy Bill Irwin, David Shiner type thing.
Oh wow.
Like red-nosed clowns, not sort of painted face clowns.
Yeah, totally.
And and it was really just came from we had of wanting to do what do we call it? It was like what the hell? It was, but it was just a new way of looking at clowning for us, and we sort of we were self-taught more or less. We didn't have direct clowning classes. One of our teachers, this guy Jim Calder, was had trained at Lecoq, and
Yeah, I
so
studied that as well.
so we had some of that. We had a background in that, and we had taken circus stuff, but this was sort of our own formal experiment with doing it, and we worked on it for years and years, and we took it to LA and sold it, and they ruined it, and
Oh no.
we made our own little short film of it, and for years we worked on it for almost 10 years. It was a long, fascinating experience.
That's so beautiful.
And then after that I worked in right after that I was in Titanic, which was a musical on Broadway.
Yeah, the adaptation after the movie hit.
No, we were prior to the movie.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, so we were first, and then it was an original piece, and that was also an extraordinary thing, and it did that for almost 2 full years on Broadway, 675 shows.
And the story has nothing to do with the movie, probably.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
So it does. The Titanic sinks. So, same story. Same story, really. Really the same story.
That's so beautiful.
About a boat. And yeah, it was great.
I'm curious, when you came out of school, because now I'm sure you can totally identify that, like, I've done the grad school audition, I've gotten called back, and, I think so many kids go to grad school now because they want to be movie stars, or they want to, because they heard you went there, they heard Rainn Wilson went there, they heard Mahershala went there. Right. And it's not so much about becoming a great actor anymore. And that's kind of why I gave up on that. But I'm curious, when you came out in the 90s, what did it look like for you to make a career? Were you just happy to be doing theater, or, television? Was that imperative to you?
I mean, movies and television were so elusive at that point for me. There was the way that the school prepared you and what you were prepared to do was at the time much more concentrated on creating a transformational actor that could go into a company system.
Yeah.
So you are a versatile enough actor that can go from classical to modern, developmental, large collaborative palette. So anybody's world. It can be straight ahead down the line. It can be radical, new, inventive, Robert Woodruff stuff. And it really was, that was what they wanted to make you. And that was what we became. And that market really had begun right when we were finishing. Yeah. Those theater companies were dying. So
like the
Guthrie, I think, was the last to go. The Guthrie, but even things like the Arena Stage of the Guthrie, Oregon Shakes, places that had real companies that you could get paid a yearly salary, and you were able to do rotating reps of everything, anything, modern, classic, anything. And that really was what I was certainly trained to become, and what I wanted to do, because I didn't, I wasn't. You certainly hoped that television and film could be a possibility, mostly because you knew that you needed to get paid to pay off your loans.
Totally.
So, you wanted to get paid in order to live in this city and to pay off your debt, because it was staggering at the time. Nothing like the students that come out now.
I'm an NYU grad, so I get it. I'm $300K in.
Right. So yeah. I know your pain, and I know how basically one of the great difficulties, even from when I left graduate school, there was no way for you to have my career when you got out, because you couldn't afford to live in the city the way I afforded to live in the city.
Yeah.
That I mostly made my living doing commercials at the time, and was able then to, was able then to not have to have a straight job in order to keep doing
Yeah.
smaller roles or not worry about going out of town, because I knew I could sustain myself with commercials. And that was its own lucky weird world that has already begun to dry up now too. So young actors who are getting out now, there's no way that you could live off the salary that, which more or less really hasn't changed from when I started doing Shakespeare in the Park.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that there was, it's just a, and have to pay back the kind of loans that you're in.
No, now you understand why I live with my dad in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's not even a question. You want to be here, and you want to continue to pursue it, so that even graduate school, and I'm going to put myself even further in the hole. It's foolhardy.
Yeah,
really, because it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous, and then what happens is that you have trained yourself to do something you'll never be able to do, because what you need is time. You need time, and you need the ease of your own being, the ease of being able to create, try, and work with people that find where you fit, and finding where you fit basically really requires dough. And it requires dough because you got to feed yourself, and you got to pay your rent, and then you got to pay back all your loans, and that's just, it's too hard to have to have two careers doing that.
Yeah,
especially when you're starting.
I spoke with one of your co-stars in 13 Hours, James Badgedale, about the same thing. And I'm curious to ask you then, as you were having these successes on Broadway, and he kind of mentioned similar thing happened to him, was there, a director or an actor or someone who saw you in the theater and brought you over to the TV film side?
No, I mean, like The Wire probably would have, like, I had a bunch of pieces here and there that I did, and then like one of the weird things about it, when this show that I had written, this thing called The New Bozina, we had moved to LA to sell it and try to win the game, and we didn't win the game, but we all got, like, all of us got cast in How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Yeah.
And so we were in this big movie, and we were helping create, the world of it, and being in meetings with Ron Howard, and it was fucking crazy. And we thought, that was going to change it. And then, it didn't, and it didn't really, it wasn't, one of the great difficulties, I think, certainly talking to younger performers and students, the danger of looking at somebody older and being like, oh, it's just a staircase, and I'm on the wrong staircase, and the reason that I'm not progressing the way I wish to, desire to, dream about, is that's a fallacy that really just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It really is it's a false idol to chase, and you will make yourself crazy by thinking I should be able to climb the staircase faster, because there's no staircase. It doesn't exist. And looking at what I did and thinking, oh, look, this guy did that, and then he did this, and then he did that, and it is not true.
It's not linear in the way people think on IMDb when they're like, oh, that makes that, and that makes that.
No.
Yeah.
Because I went out and, I moved to, I was on Broadway I'd been on Broadway twice, and then I sold a television show, and then was in this big movie, and then the whole thing, like, the bottom fell out, and I was living on credit card checks, and I had an apartment here and an apartment there, and I was trying to, I was jammed, and paying rent on credit card checks. And that's a terrible
I know, idea. Man. I'm doing it on the podcast.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
So, and then things would turn around, and then I moved back here, and I gave up living in Los Angeles, and it was too hard for me, and I couldn't do it, and I couldn't hack it.
Yeah.
And it was too lonely, and I didn't like it, and I didn't like being unemployed there, and I do like being unemployed here. It's a much easier place to be unemployed, because nobody cares that you're unemployed here.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then certainly before the pandemic, it was just like, you get on the subway, and who gives a damn about you? There's no difference. So whereas there, you feel the pressure of it in a way, or I felt the pressure of it in a way that was really counterproductive to progress.
I did the same thing. I moved to LA for 6 months, and identify to a T with what you're
Yeah.
saying.
It's a dangerous place. And it is, for some people, really loves. Like, for instance, Rain stayed. So we all moved out there, and Rain stayed and has thrived and loves it and loves living there. And he
Yeah.
has animals, and his wife loves it. So it's a great place for them to be that they really loved. And it was not for me. And was better for me to be here. So.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious, because you were writing and you mentioned you had a TV show, was writing something you were always focusing on as well? Or
No.
did that just kind of...
I mean, I knew it's interesting, because one of the aspects of really being able to say, like, I have a voice and I have something to say, it was, when I think about the title of this particular podcast,
Do you like it?
Sure. I mean, it's all there is.
Yeah, I know.
That's it.
A big name manager messaged me.
Part of combating the despair is really being able to demand of yourself and to allow that aspect of you to come out, which is your voice, which is to feel like I have ownership over the world, right? Going and coming with your hat in your hand to an audition and being like, please give me the job, I need the job. You're dead. You're dead in the water. You'll never get it. You just never will.
I know.
And people say, but then the thing is, like, but how do you get out of that despair? And one of the ways for me was you have to work hard towards, I think, is to really finding what other ways that you can have a voice. So certainly the writing has been something that periodically I have found incredibly helpful, primarily because it allows me just to feel like I'm not just a gun for hire, that I actually have something to say, and that I want to be able to say those things.
Yeah.
And, certainly the teaching was another aspect of that. Like, I wanted to be able to say to students, I wanted them to ask me questions like this and just be like, listen, we can talk about what I did, but I also want you to be able to find out what it is for you, because mine is not yours. And whatever particular path that I'm on, you have to be able to demand of yourself, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna find a way through this despair. Otherwise, you know that it will slowly crush you, and it will take away your dream. It will take away the joy that you have this. It will take away the calling that you've said that you have towards this piece. And you're just like, it's not fair. And you can do it. You can change the way you are with regard to how you interface with the business part, with the art part, with the literature part. And it is, that is a big part of the job.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't come from one person, and it doesn't come from one break. It comes from a steady diet of just problem. Really, because no is just like, am I used to having people say no? Are you kidding me? Give me a fucking break. No. Yeah. How about fuck you, get out of my face? And you're like, yeah, that happens too.
That's amazing, man. I love how buoyed you were able to stay, because I was not. I went down a dark path and I had to get sober to find my way back. But
congratulations. That's
great. Thank you. I really appreciate
that. Great accomplishment.
Yeah,
feel that way.
Coming up on 4 years.
Mazel tov. That's very good work.
Thank you. It means a lot, man. That's so beautiful. So then in the early 2000s, as TiVo and things like that started happening, more and more television shows started going. I feel like. And do you feel like at a certain point, being in New York, and having been here and done plays and been on Broadway, you had really good rapport with certain, like, let's say Marcy Phillips or
sure. The people that had known me, that I had been part of the community, that I had done enough stuff that people were, that they're able to bring you in without feeling like, what's this guy is he gonna fuck it up when you get the job, because they're on the line too, that they need you to show up and be able to perform with the people who are in the shows. So one of the first, certainly The Wire was a great example of that. Alexa Fogel was able to be like, yeah, this guy can do it. And then I got there and was able to do it. And I hadn't known the show. Thank God. No, otherwise I would never have been able to do it. I would be way too intimidated, because as I was doing the show, I was watching it and becoming progressively more and more intimidated by
the writing and
the writing,
Simon.
yeah, and Simon, and David's an incredibly nice guy and incredibly generous, really, really smart, and really brooks no bullshit, and was very generous to me and really kind, and I just think so highly of his writing. It's so spectacular.
Oh, he's my favorite.
Yeah, he really is an incredible guy.
And
so
just to talk real quick, because
yeah,
so many people love that show. You know what I mean? And you kind of hit on it yourself. You know, that show was like one of the few shows in the world that like 3 or 4 years later, you know, when it was all available on DVD, all of a sudden it just became this phenomenon. And then, you know, when I was at NYU, I took a class on it, you know, like,
sure.
can you talk about what it feels to be a part of something that immortal? You know what I mean? Like, I really think that show is immortal.
I mean, yeah, it's incredible. You know, it's just like sometimes you just get lucky and you get you know, there's other shows that I've been in where I was like, oh, this one's going to be awesome, it's going to work, and then all of a sudden it just kind of just shuffles away and nobody gives a damn about it. And
Yeah.
and this one, obviously, because it had already been, you know, when I was there, so it was easy to walk in, and you know, it's like when you play tennis with somebody who's really great, you're just much better. You know, you look better. Everybody thinks like, oh, look at that guy. He's a fucking god. He's
I
incredible.
know what you mean, man.
You're like, you know, play with Roger Federer, you're gonna hit better.
Yeah.
He's gonna make you look good. So so there really is that, and on that level, that's when you just realize like, oh, that's just that there are certain parts that are just dead lucky breaks where you just get lucky.
But
like something like that, like Breaking Bad, where that was a confluence of things that there's no way to predict it, and there's no way to expect it, that you could
do you find that kind of amazing that two of probably the world's most famous shows that you've been able to be a part of? You know what I mean?
I'm the only one who's in both of them.
That's true. You are,
There's
man.
nobody else who's in both of them.
That's
There's
you.
one actor in the world that was in both of them. That's me.
And
yeah, go ahead.
so then
after that, like, I got cast in the show Damages because friends of mine, two guys who I had gone to grad school with, created the show, and they put me in. And in the pilot, I was in one scene. I think I didn't even have a line, and I was like, "Come on, you got to give me a line. You got to give me something." And they were like,
yeah.
"We don't know what it's going to be, and maybe it'll be something, and maybe it won't." And then I ended up doing, I don't know, 10 or 12, 14 episodes of it, and I became this insane villain, and they didn't know that I was going to be like the killer, spoiler alert, of that, first season. And they were really open to ideas, and we had a long collaborative discussions about acting, about process, about life, about story. And that really was the first time when somebody who knew me, because the people who created it knew me, they knew that I could play that kind of a role. They could play a real villain.
Yeah.
And nobody would have cast me. Nobody would have cast me in that role. Not in a million years. I wouldn't have been cast as a villain.
Wow.
And because I played mostly ineffectual, middle management guys. That's what.
Or like super cerebral, brilliant genius scientist.
Yeah, sure, but but that wasn't until after.
Yeah, true.
So there was like so that somebody, because we had all gone to NYU, they knew that I was a transformational actor, and I knew that they knew, like, he's going to pay attention to what's written, and he's going to make it what it is, rather than some other idea of it.
It sounds so beautiful that NYU, it sounds like it was this, not only this incubator, but this network that continued to affect you throughout graduation and keep bringing you work.
It still does.
That's amazing. That's so beautifully put. I'm curious then, between Damages, at that point, you're on these sets with these, Glenn Close, Dominic West.
Sure.
Do you feel at a certain point like, I got this? Like, I trust myself on a set? Or every time you get a bigger and bigger job, you still feel like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely moments when you were the other actors, because there are very few actors that I performed with, and I won't name them, the majority of the actors that I've worked with, and the higher up the food chain of quality that you go, the more generous they are.
Yeah.
That there is a great generosity of spirit and a great sharing about trying to tell a story together. Yeah. And they want you, performing with Daniel Day-Lewis is easy because he's really quite something.
Yeah.
You should really check him out. He really is a good actor.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, you should totally see some of the stuff that he's done.
I'm actually good friends with his son, so I'm at,
you know. So, and Glenn, who assumes that you are going to be bringing what she's able to bring.
Yeah.
And Bryan Cranston's the same thing, where you work with people who are just firing at a very, very high level. And you then also can, you know, I had this great teacher at NYU in grad school. His name was Paul Walker, and he's now no longer with us. And Paul taught this extraordinary thing. And this is, now we're going deep into the weeds of acting process.
Oh,
so
please
all of your
tell
listeners,
me.
we're going to have to go into this. And one of the things and what was extraordinary about Paul is that Paul never really said it out loud. He made you feel what the idea of what he was teaching, what his philosophy about people, about the human spirit is, and particularly about actors, about how you need to progress in the world and how you need to move forward in the world.
Yeah.
And the thing that Paul made me feel was that you have to assume your own brilliance. That doesn't mean that you assume that you are brilliant.
Right.
It means that you assume inside your brilliance, like the brilliance of the sun. The sun assumes its brilliance because from its interior, it has it. And it assumes that. And what happens afterwards, what comes out, is the sunshine.
Yeah.
But the assumption of brilliance, the assumption that inside exists this thing for you, not like I want other people to think that I'm brilliant or that I think that I'm brilliant. And it's not thinking. It comes from a deeply held psychophysical space where you have to look at the world. You have to go through the world doing that. It's a very, very difficult to sustain.
Yeah.
But when you can, and if you can do it, if you can, or and this is going to sound incredibly corny, love yourself enough to do that, have the deepest amount of compassion for yourself and for others, and the way you listen to others, the way you have compassion when the way you're listening is compassion, like the way you're listening to me, you have this incredible sense of you can feel it, you will feel it, you will experience it, and when you begin to experience it, then you will be able to do it all the time. And then when you get really good at it, you'll be able to do it in really fucked up situations, like an audition, when you have to walk in and do some bullshit that you don't like or care or know or understand, but you have so much need. And then when your own sense of brilliance is assumed about this terrible, terrible material or mediocre material or great material, you can then move the part of the commerce aside, and you can only pursue what it is that you're trained to do and what it is that you want to be doing, which is, you know, authentic, to tell the story of X, Y to Z. And that the commerce aspect of it really is, it isn't, you're not actively pushing it aside. You're not actively saying like, I'm not any of the anxieties that come at you. That also always happen. Should I have shaken their hand? Why didn't I do this? I should have worn the shirt. I thought I was gonna like work out before I went. Like, shit, they didn't want me, and I didn't memorize it well enough. Or I memorized it too much, and then all of that stuff just moves to the side. And it isn't about an active thing that you're doing. It's actually about the thing, the way that you are considering yourself. The thing that the action that you're doing is so much more unique, right? Because it's yours, and you can't do mine. You can't assume my brilliance. And the way that my brilliance, the assumption of my brilliance, I should say, manifests is so different from yours, and should be different from mine, because we're not the same people. So, but when each one of us is able to do that, if you are able to do that, and if you are able to practice it, it's a fucking revelation. You you can't believe it. And on some level, when you look at what I like, when you sort of you're sitting back and you're like, oh, look at this guy, he does this one, this one, this one, this one, and then but essentially at the core of it, if I'm lucky or if I'm doing my job right, that's what my hope is, right?
Yeah.
My authentic self is interfacing with the writing and the people, and then at the same time, while all of this other shit is coming at you, that the assumption of my brilliance, my own brilliance, not that I am brilliant, but that my own inner brilliance is alive, and that I want to be in conversation with that, and that it looks weird and you don't understand it and you're like, what's up with that guy? What's he doing?
Yeah.
But you can practice it. You can practice it in your daily life. You can practice it. You should certainly practice it in your creative life. And people will be, it was an incredible gift that this guy, and he was a genius teacher.
Paul Walker.
Yes. And he died way too early. And many of the people who had him, you can talk to them whenever you meet somebody from that particular era who was there. I would say that almost everybody felt the same way about this person, who was really touched, really truly touched, because he made you feel it.
Yeah.
You felt it. It was an incredible gift.
And by assuming your own brilliance, I'm curious to ask you, when cultivating a character, I've said this on many podcasts, the difference between good acting and great acting is like, good actors can just make a living doing the same thing over and over again, and they're on the scale of horrible to good. Great actors develop such unique characters, and when they come on screen, you see that character, and you're so excited, like Gail Bedecker,
Sorry, I lost you. I lost you at great actors.
Oh, okay. So the difference can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. I got to the good actors, actors, and then great actors. But you said, and then great actors are...
Great actors are able to elevate a character so much that, like, when you watch that actor on the screen, even though I know it's David Costabile, I see that character. You know what I mean? I see Gail Bedecker. I see,
sure.
And I'm curious how you work on character. Like, what is your? I don't want you to expose all your secrets here, but like, what comes first for you? Is it narrative? Is it script analysis? Is it?
I mean, it's always the writing. It's got to be the writing. So
yeah.
Everything that we do is driven by writers. So, as an interpretive artist, that's where you have to start. You have to start with what is written, and then how are you included in that? Gail is that character is. It was so exquisitely written, and I've said this before in interviews, and I feel like it's. I feel like for some people who are not professional actors would be like, oh, that sounds like a cop out, and people who are would be like, oh yeah, you just get lucky. I feel like occasionally there are certain roles, certain characters that are written that you just know immediately. You just know it like a whole cloth. It's like a piece of whole cloth. There's no seam, there's no question. There is no. I never doubted my own. It wasn't about like interpreting it. I just knew it. I just had it inside. He like lived inside of me somewhere, and it was just like I just got to open a door and be like, there he is. Look, you met him. Like we'd be like, and so when I auditioned for it, I was like, that's it, and it took them, forget, like 6 excruciating weeks to be like, no, maybe somebody else. We got to find somebody else. We'll find somebody more famous. And I was like, that's exactly what I felt. I was like, what are you talking about? That's me.
Yeah.
I just showed you that I am that. But not like I need the role, but I was just like, but you wrote this role, and I know that that's me in the role. And those are, when you don't get those, and there have been ones where I haven't gotten those, it's really, it's not traumatizing, but it is despairing that you're just like, fuck me, are you kidding me? Yeah. You're not going to choose that? And you're like, wow, okay, well, wow, that's brutal. So sometimes you get lucky that you just get to walk into the shoes of somebody you already have. Like there wasn't a lot to do. And in fact, I have a friend of mine, somebody who the first time I ever worked with him, his name is Colin Buxley, and he was a director, and he's a really good pal of mine. And we've worked together on, I don't know how many different television shows, 7 or 8 or something like that. And he was direct. I mean, it was the episode where I was getting fired, and it was another really well written scene. And I had, by that time I was kind of feeling my legs, and I was like, all right, now maybe I'm going to start to, embroider a little on the edges here, and just put a little extra little curly Q here. And he was just like, no. And I was like, come on. He was like, listen, I see what you're doing.
Yeah.
He was like, just don't do it. It's like, I see it, but it's not. It doesn't help. And I was like, you've got to let me do it somewhere. And he said, do it on the word and. And I was like, oh, fuck you, dude. Fuck you. You totally boxed me in, because you can't do anything on the word and.
Yeah.
And so I even tried it in a single shot, and then I looked at him and was like, all right, you win. You broke my spirit.
Oh man.
But it was a great lesson too, that on some level, that really just when you have great writing, you can't, like, the extra embroidery it doesn't help, because you feel like, oh, I want to be involved in this, like those guys wrote so much, what if we added this? And they may have already gone that way and sort of excised that, and they're like, I think just simpler, cleaner is probably better than Baroque, Rococo. Let's just move that to the side.
So beautiful. And I'm curious, obviously with The Wire, you said you didn't know. With Breaking Bad, did you know that it was?
I knew.
You knew.
Yeah, totally.
So,
scared stiff when I walked in.
So would you say in some ways that was the catalyst that David Costabile became this amazing thing? And at this point, I'm sure it was phone calls for you. You weren't, were you in audition rooms or?
Yeah. Nobody watched that show. Nobody watched that show when I was on it. In the third
No, I'm talking about Breaking Bad.
Yeah, nobody watched that show.
What?
Nobody watched Breaking Bad in the first 3 seasons. In the 4th season, more people started watching the 5th season, the 6th season. Then people really were going nuts for it.
Some of the best cinematography in the game, man.
Yeah, but there was nobody cared. Nobody really. I mean, I think they had less than a million viewers. So if you were there from the beginning, you were one of the 1 million people, I think, that watched it. But at that time, that was a very small number of people who cared about.
I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and so is Vince Gilligan, so I was a big fan.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Wait till you have Vince on.
Yeah, I know. It should. Now that I've had you. Yeah, I know. But so then talk to me in the post. I don't even know what the post 2008 world is, right when this content bubble, I feel like, started being incubated. I'll never forget this friend of mine, Rachel Brosnahan. She took me out for dinner, and she was like, "Hey Ryan, I needed to talk to you about something." And I was like, "What's up?" And she's like, "There's this show, and they really want me to show my boobs. Do you think I should do it?" I was like, "What show?" And she's like, "This DVD company, Netflix. They're doing content. It's a show called House of Cards." And I was like, "David Fincher, Kevin Spacey, show your tits." You know what I mean? And she did, but you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy in that moment. No one knew how like seismic the game would change. Streaming, cable kind of eroding, and network television becoming less and less relevant. And even AMC after Breaking Bad, I don't really think they've kind of found their. I know you did Little Winter Sun. They've experimented here and there, but it hasn't really taken off in the way that Mad Men or Breaking Bad did. So I'm curious, what started interesting you when that paradigm shift happened?
I mean, if you are, I mean, you always need a job.
Yeah.
So you need a job. The higher math of networks and studios, and that is a very complicated math that goes into that. That seems like you can only control what you can control. So I certainly, the way I look at it is about in the best case scenario, I want to work with people that I know, people that I'm friends with, and you want to be able to work with writers that you respect and know that they're going to be working as hard as they can to make something as integral as they can. And I've been really super lucky, because I really feel that almost all the writers that I've worked with do that. And it just makes you, everybody like, oh, he's a fucking genius actor, and you're like, well, yeah, I'm a good enough, I'm the best available. The
No,
company,
you're one of the best.
the company that we work for, now is one of the producing companies is called Best Available. So on
No way! I think I've seen those trailers around.
Billions.
That's amazing.
If you look at the end of Billions, it says Best Available. So we all consider ourselves the best available.
Well, before we jump into Billions, I do want to ask you, because I felt like it was such an interesting shift in your career, and I know Michael Bay takes a lot of shit in this business, but I think that story was really important to be told, because so many people loved it. Was such a political sparring point for so long. What was it like to go in and do that kind of movie? Was that experience something
With
very
Bay?
unique? What'd you say?
With Bay?
Yeah.
With Bay?
Yeah.
What did Badge tell you?
I mean, I've heard some stories.
What did Badge tell you? I need to know what Badge said.
I'll put, we'll talk off air. We'll get coffee sometime.
So I have to. Which do you want? Do you want which stories do you want? There's so many. There's so many good ones.
Well, just tell me about, to keep.
Listen, I will say this. I can't wait to work with Bay again. And by the end, we got along very well. Michael likes to express his opinion loudly and forcefully in a way that would probably only be best described as shouting.
Yeah.
And there are very few adults really, once you really become an adult, I think shouting is, for safety's sake, I think.
Yeah.
But shouting it seems like we need to limit the amount of shouting that we do towards each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it took me a while to figure that out, and then once I figured it out, then I shouted back at him. And I'm not a shouty guy. And then he liked it and would laugh when I would shout, and so that would make me shout more. So he shouted at me, and I shouted at him, and we got along like a house of fire.
Leave it there.
So
Awesome.
I can't wait to shout at Michael Bay again.
What up, Michael Bay? I'll have him on soon.
I'm sure you're watching, Bay.
So then talk about Billions, man, because some of the finest actors in the world, David Costabile, Paul Giamatti, Maggie Siff. Yeah. And, I mean, what are the odds that, it comes all home with you with Glenn Fleshler?
Yeah. Best.
Was that you that brought that to him?
No.
Wow.
No. I wish.
When you got that pilot, did you know that this thing could be, you
always hope, you always hope. I mean, I knew I had worked with Brian and Koppelman and I had gone to college together. So this is, again, how
Brian wrote Rounders, right?
Correct. Brian and David both wrote Rounders.
Yeah.
So I had worked for them a couple times prior to Billions. And, we had, at the time when I was in college, Brian was such a big shot because he had found Tracy Chapman or he had managed her and produced her first album. And so when we were there, he was the BMOC on campus. And I was just a little theater nerd. Yeah. So, but he remembered me, and he has a great memory. And, I don't know what it was, 20 more years later, wrote to me after seeing something, maybe The Wire or Breaking Bad. And it's just like, hey, I've been following your career. Congrats. And then a couple years later, or maybe a year later, put me in a movie of his and of theirs. And, it was very fun to be able to, again, get into a long-term collaboration with writers about how you do it and what you want to do. And again, this role is something, as originally was conceived in the pilot, I was the exact opposite of what I play now. So he was supposed to be strong, silent, tight, Upper East Side WASP, who said nothing and just was the quietly behind the scenes making things happen.
Not at all what that character is now,
No.
Yeah.
In the pilot, they cut everything I did, and they were just like, you're going exact opposite. Go nuts, go crazy. And I, then we just started building from there. And then they would sort of throw out a carrot, and then I would chase it, and then we would sort of back and forth until they really honed in on exactly what kind of attack dog I was. And I never would have been cast in that role unless they knew me. because
Really?
again, it's another situation where friends know that in midstream, they're just like, I need that person to be completely the opposite of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I know that you can do this. And I'd never done it. There's nothing that they could look at and be like, oh, totally. There was a little, I've played plenty of bad guys. I've been plenty of, mean dudes.
Yeah.
But never sort of out loud and, bold and like constantly aggressive. But they just knew I could do it. And I knew I could do it too. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. That seems like super fun.
Yeah.
So then the look of it, the feel of it, and everything changed on a dime. And it's been incredibly fun. It's been, I get all the best lines. I get to do all
Yeah.
things. I get to be a horrible, spectacular person all at once.
And because Sunday's such a big day for you, I'd like to talk. Was obviously, I imagine with your theater project you had directed before, but was this, when you got the show starting to direct, was that something that was really interesting?
I mean, I had talked to those guys in the second season, and I said, what do you think about, like, putting me in at some point? And they were like, if we get to it in the fifth season, you can direct. And I was like, the fifth season? And they were like, yeah, we get the fifth season, you can direct. And I was like, all right, whatever. And they said, they're like, you have to shadow somebody twice. And each season I did. So then I shadowed somebody in the third season. I shadowed this friend, Colin Butsy. Yeah. And then in the fourth season, I shadowed Adam Bernstein, who I had worked with on Breaking Bad.
Okay.
And then this season they let me have one, which was super exciting and it was incredibly generous of them to do it, and incredibly generous of the entire company to sort of say, like, we're going to give this guy who's never done it before a shot at directing.
How did it feel?
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fucking terrifying.
I'm sure.
As you said, like, one of the things in terms of the acting, like, there are very few moments as a performer now that I feel nervous.
Yeah.
I don't get scared to do, you get anxious about it, or you get sort of like amped up, like you've got a hard scene, or you've got something that you're really trying to, that takes an enormous amount of concentration. That's quite difficult. But it's rare that you'll be like, I don't think I can do this. I'm terrified. I don't know the first thing about what I'm doing. You certainly say, like, well, I know the first thing about what I'm doing. I may not be able to do all of the pieces that I want, but I know one thing, and I'll start there and see if I can build it. Whereas for directing, I was just like, Jesus, fuck, I'm fucking out of my depth. There were many parts, and then you start to put it together and be like, oh, well, I do know this story very well. I knew the players very well. I knew the writers very well, and I knew not just the way, but what they were the story that they're trying to tell. Yeah. And so I was very lucky to be inside of that. And for me, that was also the reason that I wanted to do that. I knew that I didn't want to just become a gun for hire, but that I wanted to be in a long-term collaboration with people so that I could try to tell their story the way they wanted to tell the story. And that for the actors, that there was, for somebody who has done plenty of television and worked with lots of different directors, that I have I know what I like and I know what I don't like.
Yeah.
And I wasn't afraid of that. I wasn't afraid of the interaction between a director and an actor, because I knew what were actable notes and what were shit notes. And it was easy to be engaged with them and talk to them about what other possibilities they could try. Yeah. They come, everybody is, nobody needs help on that show. But there were definitely things you'd be like, well, what if there's just only additional stuff? So you're like, how about this? And how about that? And there were some very fun and exciting moments to be able to work with people who are at that kind of level immediately. Yeah. You're tinkering with, Maseratis. You're just like,
I know.
Look what Paul Giamatti can do. And you'd be like, watch him go. And be like, hey, Paul, can it go this fast? And he's like, yeah, you want to see? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And he just takes off, and you could give him what was incredible about it. And I had this great learning experience. There was one moment when I gave Paul, and I haven't told him this, I gave him a really imprecise note, and I watched him do it imprecisely. And And then I was like, and I went up to him and I was like, that's a bad note. Don't try it. Don't do it again. Just go back to what you had. It was so much better. And he's like, no, I think I can try it. I think I can try it. And I was like, please don't. Trust me, it's the wrong thing. And it was because of how imprecise it was. And then I gave him, many, many days later, I gave him a very precise note, and one that he hadn't thought of. And then all of a sudden he did 10 things in addition to that one very small idea that I had, that just unlocked something in him that I was like, fuck me, that's just so, it's so incredible to watch somebody who is that so finely tuned. Yeah. And then it just trips this it was like a domino effect that in him that just expanded something. And I was like, I couldn't even begin to identify what had happened. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. And not awesome because I had given him a note, but awesome because he's so attuned to trying things new, but also the way his machine works is just enormous. It's incredible. So that was very rewarding, and each person really learning, the other actors learning how they want to work and what is helpful and what's not. Yeah. Asia and I had less work together than Maggie and I, and so it was great to be able to really spend time talking to them about what they were doing, and it was a very, very rewarding personal experience for me. And
that's so beautiful. Yeah. And final few questions, because I know you got things to do today. I'm curious, just being an actor and getting a show that's a go, and then getting a show that gets another season so few actors get that. How do you stay curious as a performer being in a show in the 5th season?
I think one of the things that you really, it goes back to this idea about compassionate listening, is that when you are able to listen with your whole person, your whole body, rather than just your ears, your brain. Yeah. There's a constant sort of well of invention and joy and possibility that you may not have generated. Yeah. Right. So you've generated you've got this whole box, and you're like, hey, look at I can do this and this and this one and this one. But then it could be little things like a different piece of jewelry, or a different jacket, or a prop, or making the grip laugh, because all of a sudden, like, you're really attuned to the effect that it's having, and not just the effect, it's really about listening and really feeling like, oh, that there's always progress to be made in that level. Like, rather than being like, I just lock this down and just keep doing my same shit. And, that you can really just be like, oh, this is new. I've never been here, and look at this, and look at what you're doing today. And, it's much harder now, because it would be really, really interesting to go back, because we're all so guarded for our own and for everybody else's safety, that there is how do you begin to have freedom when breathing is dangerous? And that's a super intense thing. I think that performers, all of us are going to have to really, because now it's still dangerous. Yeah. So you're like, when does it become not dangerous? Or when have you mitigated the risk so that everybody else is not in danger and you are not in danger to each other in a scene? It's going to be a very intense moment of creation, I think, to really get to that point where you're like, wow, we're really doing this again.
And do you guys know if you have another season yet, or is Showtime?
I would assume,
Yeah.
It's dangerous to assume anything anymore, but certainly when we left, there is a commitment. There's an absolute commitment for them to finish what we're in the middle of. Yeah. We're in the middle of the 8th episode of this season. And I think I will assume something, that we will go and do a 6th season. Yeah.
And so if you need a co-star, guest star, you know who to call.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Just let me audition. That's all I need. I want the episode you're directing, though. I want to work with a master, man.
Yeah, well, you should find a different director then.
No, I want to work
A
with you.
novice.
Dude,
It's a
I'm
novice.
telling you that it's so crazy because it was my birthday. Glenn came and he was talking about how great you were doing. And
Oh,
then
nice. Oh, it was in the while we were shooting it? Okay.
yeah, he was off that day. But then you originally Craig texted me saying like we were going to do it that week, but then you got too busy with directing.
Yeah.
So it's really serendipitous that I get to talk to you right as your episode
Awesome.
is about to air. And then I would love, dude, please stay in touch. I'd love to grab a cup of coffee sometime and whenever that reality is available again.
That
But
sounds great.
final question for all the actors out there, the young Davids that just graduated Tufts, or even, the ones that are lucky enough to have just graduated grad school, in this crazy 2020 pandemic world that, have $300,000 student loans and are really trying to figure out this acting thing. What advice would you have?
I have two pieces of advice. One, don't play the comparison game. You know what the comparison game is?
Rachel Brosnahan started working the second I graduated.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Perfect. Right?
Yeah.
So what's the winning version of that game? How do you win that game?
No one. You lose
You
more
don't.
slowly.
Well, you beat the shit out of yourself.
Yeah.
The win in that game is that you get to feel superior to somebody who you feel is not entitled to what they've achieved.
Totally.
And that you get to feel shittier about yourself because you haven't achieved what you hoped they would achieve.
Yeah.
And in the time that they achieved it.
Yeah.
So that is a shit game that that is only destruction. And we're all masochists. That's why that's part of the profile. But that doesn't mean you have to practice masochism in such a shitty sophomoric way. It's a sophomoric, lousy, shit game to play. You will lose, and it's a corrosive game that can really get you into thinking that's just. I mean, talk about stinking thinking, brother, because that is some shitty thinking.
That's what we talk about in the rooms, man. Stinking thinking.
So just don't do it. When you see your friends do it, just be like, dude, this isn't helpful. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help me. It's not good to hear. It's not good to play. Don't play it. It's a bad game.
I love that.
The other thing is like you really have to find you have to pursue joy. You have to pursue what is personal joy for you. What is your personal joy? Because joy happens to you. You don't choose joy.
Yeah.
Joy happens to you. It comes out because it is joy. It is so powerful that it just blossoms in you and it comes out of your body.
Yeah.
You don't get it this way. It comes out. And you have to be able to find joy, personal joy, your joy in whatever it is that you do, in anything.
Yeah.
And that will allow you, like I'll tell you one of the things that really has brought me joy. I love living in New York City. I'm not from New York, but I love living in New York City. I love the New York Times. I love the physical New York Times.
Yeah.
I love all the people who work for the New York Times and work so hard to do their jobs. I love the people who manufacture that physical piece of paper that comes to my door every day. It's incredible. And I bring it almost everywhere with me. And certainly when I go to an audition, I have the New York Times with me because I know I'm going to learn something about the world that I don't know, and I'm going to think about not myself.
Yeah.
So I have it
the audition. Yeah.
Right. I have it in the audition room, and then I have it on the subway when I leave the audition, because you are able then to go out to not go in and be like, fuck, why didn't I get it? I wish I should have gotten it. If I had done this, I would have gotten it. And you'll do that. But then the paper, I know I would be like, oh, look, there's the paper. And the paper would bring me joy. Having it in my hand would bring me joy, and does. And I think even something as small as that you can identify and you can be like, oh, I do get great joy from this particular thing, that it is the thing that will fight your despair.
Yeah.
It will fight despair in a way that despair will never win. It will never win, because despair is easily conquerable, and joy is just going to smother that shit in a way that it will never win. I'll pit it against despair any day. And you can do it in small ways and you can do it in big ways, but finding it and really making it your own, because mine is not yours and yours is not mine, but your joy will be the thing that will drive you away always, always always from your own despair.
That might be the most beautiful piece of advice I have ever heard in my entire life. Thank you for sharing that, man. I'm gonna steal it. But before we wrap up, any final projects that you can announce or anything in the works?
I got 2 things that'll come out at some point. This mini series I did, and that's going to be, both of them are, one's going to be on AMC, and then one is going to be on Sky Television, which is a British.
Yeah.
So those things.
Amazing. David Costabile, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, man.
I got so much love for you. Stay in touch, brother. Stay well, stay positive. And it means so much to me that you came on, man.
My pleasure. Good luck, Ryan.
All right. Much love.
Take care.